Well, John, what trends in manufacturing are you seeing right now in terms of successful adoption of data principles or current data principles?
And Emmanuel, it's a good question, and thanks for asking. Really, as I get some of my research done and looking at those organizations that are successful, sometimes it's easier to answer the question which ones are not successful because it happens so often. But the ultimately the availability of data right now is at a level that organizations are having trouble keeping up with. And the ones that are successful with it, I believe, are the ones that can separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of what data is important to use. Too often, organizations try to track too many data points as they use it, or they will see the data and the analytics that goes along with it as a panacea, as a silver bullet that's going to fix all their problems. So the ones that are successful at it, the way I see it, are those that use it as a part of a successful operating system or management system, where they are regularly tracking what's important to them. They're tracking it in several domains and not just one. The domains that I often talk to people about in terms of being successful are people, quality and safety, service, cost, and growth. And without a balanced approach to looking at something like that, then oftentimes the results that organizations will get will be something that is not what they're looking for, or much less than what they thought it would be. The ROI becomes so much less. So it's a focus on a balanced approach. Secondly, to me, it's also a focus on those data points that are drivers or lead indicators. Organizations that are successful understand that it's about those process data points that can truly help them to understand where their problems are and fix those problems in the process. And then really the last part, and it's something that goes along well with our conversations that we've been having in the past, Emmanuel, and that's about the display of that data, creating a scorecard that allows you to know, being transparent with those in your organization, how are we doing? How are we winning? And if we're not winning, what is it we need to do to make improvement on? Too often, again, folks, when you start thinking about visual management, they want to make sure that everything is green so it becomes a good show. But the gift in the visual management of some of those data points are actually the red dots, such that they can make improvements to their processes and grow.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, isn't it? We all do just want to see the green, and then we're getting it all done just right. But reality of business is not that it gets to be like green all the time. There's
It
things you
can't be
got to
green all
improve.
the time. I mean, if,
Right.
if you're green all the time, where's the improvement possibility then? If you're truly an organization that wants to be lifelong learners and continuous improvers, then there's got to be red dots. And it might mean that you're not setting your goals, frankly, high enough. You don't have to set goals that are way too far out that you never achieve, but you want them to be challenging as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you kind of you worked into what this next question was just about how the sweet seat execs need to focus on meeting strategic plan objectives and how to integrate these scorecards into strategic plans so that that strat plan is not just a dusty binder, but it's actually in action.
Absolutely. So how you deploy that strategy is that much more important as well, right? Now, again, I talk about both the risks and the benefits. I think some of the risks and some of the trends is that when these C-level, C-suite folks, they start to see the allure of the data points, and I can see it on the screen, and I don't have to get out and be a leader anymore. I can just manage by behind that screen and set that up going forward. Is that they need to continue to get out into their workplace and understand and communicate with their people, and they do that with that balanced approach that I talked about before. So utilizing the data to understand what's going on with their employees is just as important as utilizing the data to understand what's going on with their cost and their margins. Because if they can't engage their employees in the change that needs to be done, then the C-level will not be able to understand and see that happen. Now, you also mentioned the fact of how that C-level looks as data analytics and going backward. It's important to understand where we've been so that we know where we are going. Absolutely. So reflecting on that data is very important on a regular basis, whether that's quarterly or annually, to take a look at the data so that you can identify if there are any things changing in the marketplace before it's too late. It's not a focus on those past metrics, but it's an understanding of those past metrics, whether you're losing market share somewhere or heaven forbid, something like a pandemic pops up again and totally blows up your supply chain or whatever it is, and you can't respond to it in a way that allows you to be effective. So they need to be able to reflect on their regular data so they can make changes for the future as well. And again, I know I touched on it inside that question, but they have to be transparent with their team, and they also have to be sure and equip. The ones that are most successful are equipping or enabling their team members to solve problems at the right level. The C-suite does not have to be involved in every activity that goes on inside the organization, but they need to be able to cascade the importance of the vision and those high-level metrics down to the front lines so that they understand the impact they're having on the overall organization. Absolutely.
Yeah, I hear some people refer to like the democratization of data, both in input and in being able to view what's going on in the company.
That's right. Yes.
I guess that leads to how do manufacturers implement a new data strategy and make that part of the culture?
Well, it's we were talking about this a little bit, in a conversation we've had a little while back. Oftentimes organizations strategically will say, wow, we need to move from what we're doing today to this data strategy. And that's not really what I want. What I want organizations to see the data as, the implementation of digital, is to augment what they already have going on. You touch on this. I mean, folks will use spreadsheets to track their metrics. They'll have reports that they'll use, different pieces of software that they use to be successful. But the fact is, again, there's so much information available that can help organizations make decisions that you want to be able to learn. How do I capture that most important information? The organizations need to understand what pieces of data they can utilize to create more value for their customers and not just extract value out of their business, such as cost reduction or process or productivity improvements. But how do I understand this data, where my customers are, so that I can continue to scale and grow, whether it's in different markets or different regions or whatever that is, or frankly, I can vertically integrate and understand how I can add more value by understanding the data that I have.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that you're saying it's not just an operational activity, but it also can be used on the marketing and sales side and product development side. And I think a lot of companies miss out on that.
Well, and it's a mindset too. I mean, look, I tend to be one. I'm not necessarily an early adopter when it comes to new technology, but it continues to come at us as an industry a lot faster than it used to. I mean, I consult many organizations who are curious how they utilize data better. If they understand what their key outcome metrics they're shooting for, and they keep those focused on just a few strategic key metrics, I believe they have the opportunity to be more successful. Then ensure that your data strategy aligns with those metrics. Okay, so you want to make sure you can find some overlap inside of that activity. Also, organizations sometimes they see, as I said before, the data as a panacea, and they take away everything else they already set in place. Right. And the fact is, you're just expanding that management system you set up, that regular cadence of review, whether it's a daily huddle with your team or a tiered huddle with your leadership team, or an understanding that on a monthly basis, I need to review what went well over the last 30 days and what we're going to do over the next 30 days and what will happen is going to be important. And then really lastly on that data strategy, again, I believe that, the technology buzzword, if you will, looking out the past 12 to 18 months has been, or maybe even a little bit further, has been AI. For a little while, I worked for IBM Watson, and to understand the artificial intelligence, when again, we really talked about it as augmented intelligence and not artificial. When that information becomes easier for you to reach as an organization, and you can make decisions that will predict things from happening in the future or predict when things will happen in the future, it allows you to adapt and adopt to specific situations that have occurred, such as a pandemic, such as chip shortages that you can't get the parts that you need. So we will get better as a result of some of the crisis we faced over the last 12 to 18 months, and understand that better utilizing AI to predict those things in the future, not to predict a pandemic, but to predict the disruption that will occur and allow us to react and respond to that quicker.
Right. I mean, it could be freezing temperatures in Texas, or some event that's going to disrupt. It doesn't always have to be the giant pandemic, right?
Absolutely. Exactly right.
So it sounds to me like maybe um, companies need to look beyond spreadsheets to be able to harness the power of their data. Is that the position you're taking right now?
Well, I think it is, and there's nothing wrong with keeping spreadsheets to understand what's happening inside of your vision or inside of your business. But let's face it, we don't have enough analysts inside of our organization that can create pivot tables that are going to drive us to success. We have to be able to learn to consume the information that is out there today to help us make better decisions in the future. One of the terms I use as competitive advantage is really the opportunity for a business to improve at a rate faster than the competition. That's competitive advantage. And so if that data availability and the amount of data is going to help you gain that competitive advantage and improve faster, then you absolutely have to learn how to utilize it more effectively. No doubt about it. Again, it's not the solution to all. If you don't have a good management system in place, if you don't have a good system that identifies and helps you to solve problems and utilizing your team members to help you solve that problems, it may only create more confusion in your organization to have more data coming your way. But when you can take the opportunity to implement a system such as lean into a transformational and bring on the digital power that is AI and some of the analytics capabilities that exist today, you've got a real opportunity to accelerate your growth at a rate that you're not used to. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, and like you said, remaining competitive in
Yes.
the shifting sands of the marketplace right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, we've watched it happen with small business on our own. Merger and acquisition is going to continue to occur. The shift in technology, you just watch Amazon and what happens with what's available with the data that they have on you as an Amazon Prime member. They've got all kind of data. That information is not going to slow down as much as we want it to. We got to figure out how to harness that and create more value for our customers. Absolutely.
Well, that's great. I appreciate the conversation. I think kind of wrap up with the question around how you've seen obstacles in implementing, and kind of what are the biggest pain points that you've had around your clients getting getting this data stream in a way that they can manage and use.
Sure. Well, let's talk about some of those obstacles. Absolutely, and then maybe we can have a further conversation about how they can overcome those obstacles. But I see it several different ways. I mean, first of all, digital transformation is another set of buzzwords that's thrown around too much right now. And the fact is, when you look at most organizations, digital transformation is in name only. There's not true transformation that's occurring. Transformation of itself really, if you look at the definition of it, requires some behavioral change. And so to adapt and adopt an approach utilizing data analytics requires behavioral change that's not always easy. So again, as an organization, you have to be prepared to face resistance with any new approach that you're using. Some people are just not going to embrace it the way you want them to. So I think that's one of the major obstacles is the behavioral change that's required is very difficult. And sometimes that behavioral change is you as the CEO who have done things a certain way, or a fourth generation owner of a manufacturing company and you've been doing it a certain way and you're trying to convince your board to make a change. It's not easy to do. Secondly, and again, oftentimes it can be sold as this data is going to replace the need for leadership, and it absolutely doesn't do that. So in any large organizational initiative, leadership is going to be required to make that effective. So that has nothing to do with data analytics or data availability or AI. That has everything to do with being a leader who's going to cast a vision, and that this data analytics and AI capability is going to augment the speed in which we can implement this activity. And so that's often an obstacle as well. And then really the third thing, and where I see most organizations will face the biggest challenge is in the number of metrics that they try to measure. Now, again, you start throwing more data there, you can absolutely generate more metrics than you know what to do with. So staying focused on what the most important metrics are, and not only focusing on those outcome metrics, but also learning to utilize the data to focus on your process metrics, how well your processes are improving, or your driver metrics, which will help you to identify if you're changing the behaviors you need to change to be successful. So some of those are the bigger obstacles that I see inside organizations trying to implement a data strategy into their model.
All right. Well, thank you, John. That actually, I get excited when I hear you talk about it. I want to get in there with you, get it done.
There's I've been told pretty often that passion for the leadership development is inside of that, but I also know that you got to have a scorecard to measure if you're winning. There's a scoreboard in every activity to know if you're winning. Whatever the metric is, you got to understand if you're winning and keeping score so that you can make change when you need to make change. And I think about that. I mean, that's how organizations can address this. It's a rigorous process to reduce the number of metrics that you try to measure, to learn to focus on those driver or process or lead metrics and not focus on the things so much that have happened in the past. Too many times data can end up being historical, which turns into hysterical data that I've heard friends of mine call it. That's not anything you can really use. We have to be able to use what's happening today to implement our business today. Things just change too rapidly to make that happen. So
you're more of forecasting based on current reality versus trying to see what happened in the past.
Right. You can run trends all day long, but as business, you mentioned temperature. The hurricane season's about ready to start down here as we record this down in the East Coast, Southeast. So that's something that as you watch that'll change your business conditions. You got to be able to tell as that's coming in what it's going to do. All those things have impact that we need to understand and be able to predict better in the future how we're going to respond to it, so that we don't have the interruptions that we're seeing today as a result of crisis.
Yeah, and I think you said something that was interesting also, just around that the software and the data culture is going to augment what the leadership team is doing. It's still a human business, and you can't expect it to replace what you're saying, the leadership. So I like that piece a lot.
No, I think you can automate all you want to with regards to that data, but it will not replace the need for good leaders to cast a vision, to hold people accountable, to set up a management system that you're regularly reviewing it, and really that you're acting on the information that the data is giving you. Because we can get paralyzed with all that information trying to figure out which one of these things should we act on. And somebody's got to be there. That's why you need to reduce the number, but somebody's got to be there to help you say, is this metric driving me to action or not? And that'll help me to get better as an organization.
Well, that's great. I appreciate your thoughtful answers to these questions, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right.
All right.
Good to be with you, Emmanuel. Thanks.